Welcome everyone to the August 20th, 2025 meeting of the Thurston County Planning Commission. The Thurston County Planning Commission is a resident advisory committee to the Board of County Commissioners on land use and planning matters such as the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance amendments. Planning Commission actions are in the form of recommendations to the county commissioners, the final decision makers. All Planning Commission meetings are open to the public. Community members are welcome to observe all Planning Commission briefings and working sessions. Let us start by introducing folks around the room. We'll start with Commissioner Casino.
I'm Eric Casino. I live in the Lacey urban growth area and I represent the county at large.
Barry Halverson, Yelm, Washington, District 2.
Yvonne Miller, I live in Olympia, District 1.
Colin Bartlett, Tumwater, District 5.
Bill Fishburne, I live and serve in District 4.
Sandy Kaiser, I live and serve in District 3.
Nelson, District 4.
And then it looks like we've got Commissioner Hanson on.
Joel Hanson, serving District 3.
Joel is our chair, but he is working remotely today, so I will be stepping in as chair functionally for this meeting, and I am Daniel Bumbarger, vice chair from District 1. All right, having done that, sound and video does seem to be working, which is wonderful. Let us move to the approval of the agenda. Everyone have a copy of the agenda in front of them. Let me know if anything needs edited, tweaked, moved, any concerns, additions.
I move to approve the agenda.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All righty, motion passes. Okay, with that out of the way, we'll move on to the approval of the meeting minutes from August 6th, 2025. I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes and accept the recording as the official record.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. There we go. So we have moved on to the public communications part of the meeting. The Thurston County Planning Commission welcomes comments from the public at all meetings. We have some general speaking guidelines. Please introduce yourself, including the address that you reside in the county. Please address the Planning Commission, not the audience or the staff. The Planning Commission may not respond to public comments. Speakers are limited to a total of 3 minutes. The timer will show on one of the video screens to help you keep track of time. Meeting attendees cannot donate their speaking time to another person. No comments that are lewd and offensive, inflammatory, hateful, defamatory, or discriminatory in nature. No comments that are commercial in nature. All materials provided to the county may be subject to release pursuant to the Public Records Act, and remarks on projects that have already had a Planning Commission public hearing will be forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners for their consideration. Thank you for your cooperation. We'll start here in the boardroom with folks on the list who signed up, and I see Daniel Bayan first. So go ahead, Daniel.
I'm sorry, this is my first time to one of your commissions.
Oh, no worries. There's a podium right there. Go ahead and stand up, introduce yourself and where you live, and you'll have a timer for 3 minutes to speak to us.
If he wishes to speak.
If you wish to speak.
No microphone here.
The room will catch you just fine. You're good.
My name is Daniel Bryan. I live at 14145 Mariposa Lane Southeast in Yelm. And I'm here to, I got a letter from the Planning Commission that they're for some kind of a natural open land parcel. It was within 500 feet of mine. And I tried to find more information about what the open land was. And I really don't have any problem with the open land. Problem I have is he applies for this permit for a tax exempt, and those taxes are distributed amongst me and others in the neighborhood. And I just don't feel it's right for the taxes that he is saving. I mean, I welcome that he does that, but I don't think it should raise my taxes. That's all the comment I have.
Thank you very much. Moving on. Cindy, you are up.
I'm not, I checked no on box.
Oh, sorry, I did just realize you did check no. Betsy, you're up next. Lovely to see you in person today.
Hi, my name is Betsy Norton. I live in Olympia. And I would just like to put in just a couple of remarks on the utilities chapter. Just talking about data centers and energy use. I recommend the planning commission add language to the utilities chapter, which state as policy that the county will take action to protect its residents from adverse impacts on power and water resource availability and cost that may come with business permitting. I know that utilities are private utilities, they're managed by the Utilities Commission, but the county is the one who does the permitting for the new businesses. And so it's at that point that you guys should be able to be taking into account the accumulated power demand and the accumulated water demand and apply that to your permitting rules so that we don't get into a situation. I feel like we're entering into a time of scarcity, or we should treat it as scarcity in terms of renewable power and in terms of both surface and groundwater. They've been having a lot of problems if you look at Virginia with data centers coming in and electrical rates going through. And I know in the western side, those data centers also use a lot of water to do cooling because they have all these servers running all the time. So I would just ask for you to think about that and maybe put something into the comp plan so that you can take action later as it's needed. So, thank you.
All right, that does it for folks in the room. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you on here, but go ahead.
It's okay.
Please introduce yourself.
Been too late. Sign in.
No worries. Introduce yourself and state your address.
My name is Rhonda Larson Kramer. I live at 1814 East Side Street Southeast in Olympia. And I don't have anything pressing to discuss today, so I thought I would give just a highlight from the testimony from one of the experts who testified in our SEPA appeal of the Port of Olympia's plans to expand the infrastructure and air traffic at the Olympia Airport. And that hearing was in July. The hearing videos are all on YouTube. If you want to find them, you just Google Stop Olympia Airport Growth, and there's a link to the YouTube videos at the top of the Action Network petition that will pop up as your first Google results. So we appellants presented several excellent expert witnesses as well as some lay witnesses, and perhaps the most impactful testimony came from hydrogeologist Jim Matthew. He has 30 years of experience, much of it in Thurston County. He emphasized the vulnerability of Tumwater's drinking water aquifer under the airport. The attorney for the appellants asked him, "And have you come across many aquifers like this one?" And he answered, "I would say this is one of the most vulnerable settings that I have seen in Western Washington in my work." That's 30 years. He also noted, one, this is an economic issue, and two, our failure to protect our drinking water below ground stands in stark contrast to how much we protect our drinking water sources above ground. Quote, "This is a very vulnerable setting with the current activities that are already occurring above this amazing groundwater reservoir that we have just 20 to maybe a couple hundred feet below ground surface. And it really needs protection. The level of care that the Seattle Public Utility has for the Upper Cedar River watershed, which is one of Seattle's water sources, is incredible. They surveil that upper watershed area. They don't allow anybody onto it. And we don't have the same type of level of care for what's beneath ground and the aquifers that we use, but that we do not see. There's really a mismatch there. We need to be really careful with these groundwater resources that we rely on. And it's not just an environmental issue. This is an economic issue, Mr. Examiner. You know, a contamination issue of an aquifer and wells sets us back economically because then we have to invest all this money in cleaning up a problem that should never have occurred in the first place," unquote. So I wanted to bring that to this body because it may appreciate hearing this information because this vulnerability is actually in many places in Thurston County. That's because it was formed by glaciers that dropped a lot of sand and gravel, creating a lot of permeability in aquifers. And that results in groundwater flowing into the rivers and keeping them cool, which in turn enables salmon to survive. And the Deschutes River gets most of its in-stream flow from groundwater, especially near the airport, and that's a usual and accustomed fishing ground for the Squaxin tribe, and it's protected by treaty as a result. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Rhonda is a promising career as an auctioneer. Alrighty, well, if that is it for folks in the room, we'll go ahead and move to participants on Zoom. If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand.
There's nobody.
Oh,
0.
I will not read that script then, and we will move on. Okay, so we'll move to agenda item 4, staff updates. Derek, you are on.
Thank you. I think I'm just gonna provide one update today. I don't know if folks have been following, but we made a recommendation and the Board of County Commissioners designated lands of the long-term agricultural plan of economic significance. And that was actually appealed by FutureWise recently, and it went before the Growth Management Hearings Board. And we prevailed on all but one issue. So I just wanted to give folks an update, and it might require some I's and T's dotting from the Planning Commission. But the one issue that came up, they upheld the long-term agricultural designation that the county made. What they did want to ensure is that farmlands of statewide significance are considered. And we have done that in the comp plan, but we might use this opportunity to dot I's and cross T's and just have a bit of a discussion about it at some point in one of the upcoming meetings, just so that we can make sure that we are in compliance with the order and it's clear that we did what we said we were going to do, which was consider them during the periodic update. And we've built policies into the comp plan around those. So that is the one staff update I had. But I also want to give a shout out because my TPL gave testimony for the Growth Management Hearings Board. These are not recorded or anything, but she did a fantastic job and represented the county's work spectacularly.
There's no plan to reopen LTA for a whole new review?
No, for the most part, the Growth Management Hearings Board upheld the work that we did. So we just need to make sure that we have considered the lands of the state significance.
Farmlands of statewide importance.
So farmlands of statewide importance. So that's the one little piece that I think we just have to kind of pull loose end on. So.
In case they conflict is basically the idea.
It's that we're required to consider them when we're doing the long-term agricultural designation and when we're building the policies for the future. So
we just need to plug in a consideration line. We're good.
A quick reminder is there are a couple different tiers of important agricultural soils that are designated, and we've designated kind of the most important soils, and then we have some that are a lot harder to farm that weren't included in the long-term agriculture. So we're looking at different options other than the 1 to 20 agricultural zoning for protecting those lands.
All right. It's very early, but our agenda is a little topsy-turvy today. We will move on to calendar with agenda items and attendance. So if you move later into your document, you'll see we have a upcoming special, is it not in this?
Next week.
Yeah, it's not, they're not listed here like they normally are. So we have an upcoming special session next week on Wednesday. That's the 27th. Normal time. Is anyone unable to attend that?
I don't think I'll be here.
Commissioner Nelson won't be present. Sounds like no, they're all right. And then the next meeting will be September. Is there anyone who is unable to attend the September 3rd meeting?
Question here.
Yes.
Says tentatively no topics. I thought we were gonna do the developmental application review.
That's correct, Commissioner Harrison. That's a mistake on the agenda. We will bring back the Black Lake Quarry piece.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And then we're making a decision at that one because we're basically out of runway at that point. All right, and is anyone unable to attend the September 3rd meeting?
I'll have to be on Zoom,
It's okay.
be on the Oregon coast.
It's a lovely place to be.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound like we have any quorum issues with the next two meetings. It is very early for it, but do we have any good of the order items? Give everyone a taste of leaving like an hour early. Hearing nothing. Okay, it is too early for us to start the public hearing. I suppose we could spend 14 minutes on the Thurston 2045 update, Maya.
Yeah, I think that would be a great use of time. So I provided a PowerPoint, Maya Teeple, Senior Planner for the formal record. I did provide a PowerPoint for this meeting. It's the same as we had last meeting, and I'll run through the first 3 or 4 slides of that, and then we can jump right into our discussion. So at the last meeting, we did a little bit of framing about how far we've come and where we still have to go. Sorry, let me see if I can, am I sharing my screen now?
It is loading. It's up. You're good.
Great. Great. So at our last work session, we talked a little bit about framing. I just wanted to provide an overview of timeline and context about the most useful recommendations and decision points for our planning commission in terms of what is remaining for the board to really focus in on. So we have been in work sessions with our planning commission since January of 2024. And that initial review of chapters and providing feedback on the initial language and policy language and narrative happened for that whole year in 2024 into early 2025. And then we came out with a draft, and the Planning Commission revised that further to create the public hearing draft. And that happened early this year. So we've had 2 smaller rounds of feedback from our Planning Commission on all of our chapters so far. We held the public hearing, we got quite a few comments, and now we are working on developing feedback based on those comments. So just so we're tracking, that's the 3rd round of feedback. We are hoping to get out of Planning Commission within the next couple of weeks. If we could do it at the next meeting, that would be super awesome because we're moving through the board process quickly and we would like to get a hearing scheduled, but we really can't do that without recommendations from the Planning Commission. So it's, statutorily, we're required to get this done by the end of the year. And that was the goal we'd like to have, but of course, we'll accommodate discussions if we need additional work sessions for the Planning Commission. So we made a lot of progress when we talked about this at the last meeting, but in terms of how the board will be reviewing this, this is a meaty 300-page document, and they certainly will focus in on the topics that they're most dedicated to, but they might not read every line-by-line issue. So for our board conversations, we are highlighting the big policy decisions. I think there's really 5 of them, and I'll go over them very quickly here, but we are hoping to get a recommendation from the Planning Commission on each one of those big policy decisions. And we can continue with the chapter language tonight as appropriate with your discussions. But once we get through those, we're hoping to get formal recommendations on those policy decisions as well. So I'll just summarize these real quickly and then we can discuss or jump back into chapters. But the big policy decisions as we have those conversations with the board, the first one for land use is on the rural industrial uses and whether or not those should be limited to only industries that support natural resources. The Planning Commission has been very clear on this in the past. So, I feel feel pretty comfortable with the direction that we've headed in that with all the policy language that's currently in the plan, but we'll be looking for a formal recommendation with any supporting findings on that. Housing, so we've included the 5% rural growth goal, and the recommendation is what is the pathway for that? So a bigger conversation on what the timeline the board should consider for that is, and potentially what kind of tools we should consider for that. Because those are decisions that the board will ultimately have to make if they want to achieve that 5% rural growth goal. And then development regulations have the bulk of the decision points. So we have Grand Mound and whether we bump densities within the residential zones or in the commercial areas. Both of those are options right now, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we move through the items over the next two meetings. Rural detached ADUs and whether or not they should be allowed as part of this update, and then conservation subdivisions and if they should be included with the density provision bonus. And so those are the big decision points where we have kind of two options for everything. As I've said, the Planning Commission has provided clear feedback and that's already incorporated into the plan, but we'll be asking for formal recommendations and motions on all of these pieces. Questions before we go into chapters for 9 whole minutes?
You have the green light. Keep going.
Swell. So I think we left off on environment, and I do want to just comment real quick that Commissioner Bartlett and a few others worked on some housing changes. We skipped over housing, and we will come back to that. But we sent that out for the whole Planning Commission to cover. So just know that we do plan to go back to that chapter probably after we get through everything else. But moving through our Chapter 9, I think where we landed with the last time we talked comp plan was I'll go over some of the changes that we've already made in response to public comment and then main decision points that are remaining for the Planning Commission. So Chapter 9 is our environment, recreation, and open space chapter. Again, old chapter numbers, we are renumbering them. But we have added in a couple of changes in response to the public comment. Most of those are from a WDFW comment. They had a lot of changes on our habitat corridor language and just policies across the board in that chapter. And they were really good, succinct suggestions. So we pretty much included almost all of their suggestions to the policy changes and also to the narrative changes. And then a couple of other comments were received. The other big one, I think, was from Betsy. She had a couple of comments, and some of that has been incorporated. And then another comment we received was on a scaled approach to permitting in terms of more, what's the word for it? More projects that occur fairly regularly, like utility repairs or right-of-ways and things like that, and having a faster permitting track for them, specifically as it relates to critical areas. And that is not technically a comp plan change. I think the policies in our comp plan are flexible enough to support something like that. But I've already communicated with Claire, who is working on our future CAO updates, and she can move that comment through as part of that process. So there's a different pathway for that to be considered. And that, of course, will come back through the Planning Commission when that is reviewed next year. So decision points for the Planning Commission on Chapter 9. There are no major policy decision points in terms of how we're communicating to this with the board, but I will say that there are a few opportunities for the Planning Commission if you'd like to consider additional water conservation policies, or also if you would like us to look into additional wildlife protection policies beyond what is already covered. We do cover those two things, but we got a lot of comments saying that maybe we should be doing more. So I'll just open it up for discussion. I know at the last meeting, forestry came up, and so I'll open the table to you all.
Floor is open. Does anyone have additional comments for Chapter 9? Any considerations for adding additional water conservation or additional wildlife protection policies into this chapter? I know we did have several suggestions, and those for the most part did get included, including the wildlife corridor stuff. So increasing for biking and hiking trails and more strict goals for conserving mature forests and tree canopy. So it's really a question of, do we want to do anything substantively more in this, or are we okay to give it a good to go?
I'm curious,
Go ahead.
I'm curious, the examples, if you had any examples of the sorts of recommendations people were asking for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pull up my other sheet real quick. And so just as an example, and Amelia, feel free to jump in here, but some of the other comments were like protect beavers and beaver dams, follow requirements of the Migratory Bird Act, limit nutrient loading near water bodies, increase trails for biking, hiking, walking down Tumwater Boulevard, and there were a couple other things, but they were fairly specific, and that was the reason that we did not just go ahead and make those changes, because typically our policies that live in the comp plan are fairly high level overarching, and those are more implementation items that we do programmatically. So that's just an example. There is a crosswalk in the June 4th memo that has kind of a detailed list of the requests from public comment.
Yeah, those include additional water conservation policies and water meters on all permit exempt wells. We had a discussion on how feasible that was, and it didn't sound like it was super feasible. The other one was consider a more scaled approach of permitting for smaller projects, setting goals for conserving mature forest and tree canopy, adding in previously submitted BHAS goals and policies from the September 23rd, 2024 meeting. Further protect wildlife and follow federal legislation that protects wildlife, and increasing trails for biking, hiking, and walking. I don't have no strong objections to really any of those ideas. I think we discussed that the water meters things is basically difficult or impossible to implement.
Yeah, it's difficult at this point. What I will say is some of the items that the commission is pursuing right now, like cluster developments with incentivized density bonuses, those can get us to water metering with a certain type of water system. But across the whole rural area, it's fairly difficult. We don't have really a program set up to do that kind of work yet. That's more of a few years down the road type of item.
I mean, if we spoke generally in favor of the further protecting wildlife and following federal legislation, like the Migratory Bird Act, and increasing trails for biking, hiking, and walking, is that something that staff would be comfortable incorporating?
Yeah, and Amelia, feel free to jump in. I think we have policies that already cover that very generally, but we can certainly go back through and see if we can add any specificity to those.
Yeah, those are already pretty generally covered. Is there a gap you're seeing that's not in the draft?
Oh, they did specifically call out the Migratory Bird Act. Are we not referencing that in the current?
Double check.
Because if we aren't, I feel like that's a pretty low bar, easy thing to include. Hey, let's follow federal law.
Is
Do that
it
in
worth
other
noting
places.
though, if federal law were to change in a way in which the planning commission didn't,
Oh.
maybe there's a benefit to keeping things
It's
general.
a fun time we're in where we have to
Things
worry
aren't
about
locked in.
what should be settled federal law is up in the air.
Did add specific information on supporting migratory wildlife.
I remember that.
That way it is still
Neutral
supporting
to
it,
federal law.
but not dependent on whatever's happening.
Yeah, I remember that was gonna be my main concern was that, like, I think there are a number of potential, there's a lot that we could be talking, I would rather not say specifically federal law. I would rather say the intent that we're like, those conservation intents specifically, if we're wanting to reference those, for example, what we did with migratory birds. I
Yeah.
think we covered migratory wildlife in general.
So we've done migratory fish, wildlife, and plant habitats.
Awesome.
So I think we do.
So it sounds like oh, go ahead, Commissioner Halverson.
Maya, excuse me, Amelia. I had requested on page 9-21, which is, goal 3, objective B, policy EROS-3.B.4, that we change the, thing from especially, after lake management districts to lake management districts under RCW 3661. Special utility districts in accordance with RCW 8538. Because they had special utility districts under RCW 3661, which is inappropriate. So I just want to make sure that we make that language correction in that policy.
What is the RCW you're saying?
It should be, create lake management districts under RCW 3661 and special utility districts in accordance with RCW 8538 instead of RCW 3661. They're two separate RCWs that affect those type of lake management districts.
Thank you. We'll make that change.
Awesome. That's okay. Just reminding folks that it's 7. It would be awesome if we could get very close to finishing. Is this a quick comment or?
I was actually just going to say that it was 7 and I have comments, but I would rather hold them off.
Okay, so are we okay to thumbs up this and move to public comment, or do we want to discuss this further?
I want to discuss it further, but I want to.
Okay. So we will move to the public hearing. Okay, I think I get to hit this. Let's do it. All right. Today we are to hold a public hearing on the open space application from for Roland and Cindy Gorgas or Gorgas. There was a sign-in sheet at the entrance of the room. If you wish to testify, please make sure you have signed this piece of paper. It now lives over here. So if you haven't and you would like to, it's right there. If you are on Zoom and wish to testify, please choose the raise your hand option. If you are dialing in, press *9 to raise your hand. The chair or host will call your name and unmute you. When it's your turn to speak, make sure you also choose *6 if dialing in to unmute yourself. Each person will have 3 minutes to testify. I will be calling out names for oral testimony. In person first, Zoom second. When you hear your name, please come forward to testify. Time may not be given to another person. When testifying, please provide your name and address for the record. Ask staff, that would be Tasha, to review the public comment timer. Alrighty, so we will start with a staff presentation. Marissa, I believe you are providing background on the proposal, written comments submitted for public hearing, and any additional information requested by the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. For the record, my name is Marissa Wistman with Community Planning. This evening, we're here to hold a public hearing on the Gorgas Open Space Tax Program application. The purpose of the Open Space Tax Program is to conserve open space lands, which the Open Space Taxation Act under RCW 8434 requires of county governments. Tax reductions are granted if qualifying properties are maintained in a rural, undeveloped state. Staff is currently processing the Gorgas open space application. The proposed 76.96 acre property is located immediately south of 17825 138th Avenue Southeast, which is west of Bald Hill Road Southeast and east of Vale Road Southeast, and in the Nisqually Water Resource Inventory area in unincorporated Thurston County. The applicants propose to enroll all of their 76.96 acres in open space under the farm and agricultural conservation land and the significant wildlife habitat area categories, with no residential structures or appurtenances to subtract. The Gorgas property has a history of farming, which has included raising livestock and more recently hay and honey production. While not formerly enrolled in the assessor's farm and agriculture program, the Gorgas property is mapped within the long-term agriculture or LTA zoning and has undergone commercial ag use within the past 10 years, making it eligible for the board's farm and agricultural conservation land category. The applicants wish to enroll 15 acres of their property under this resource category while continuing to hay, raise honeybees, and produce honey for 3 points. Additionally, the Gorgas property contains a wetland and upland mixed-age forest habitat, which has been documented to support a variety of critical areas ordinance wildlife species of local importance. Due to these features, the applicants also wish to enroll 61.96 acres of their property in significant wildlife habitat area category for an additional 3 points. So the total open space enrollment is for 6 points and a 50% reduction under the application. The Gorgas property, in conclusion, meets the criteria for enrollment under both priority resource categories for 6 points and a 50% reduction based on the following factors, which are included in RCW 8434, as well as the Thurston County Open Space Tax Program guidelines. The property lies within the LTA zone and has received commercial ag use within the past 10 years. Excuse me. Continued ag use in upland areas will maintain these portions of the property for future farming. The property supports CAO wildlife species of local importance, and the applicants submitted the appropriate supporting documents for both priority resource categories with their application materials. The Planning Commission held a work session on July 16, 2025 on the current open space application. At the end of this work session, the Planning Commission agreed to set this public hearing. Notice of the public hearing was published in the Nisqually Tribune on June 30, 2025. In addition, a webmail announcement was sent to the Community Planning Division's email listserv by August 6, 2025, and a press release was issued by August 13, 2025, as well as notification letters being sent to all neighbors within 500 feet of the applicant's parcel. Thurston County Community Planning also has updated their website with all available documents being considered at this hearing. As of today, including a comment from the gentleman in the audience this evening, we've received 3 public comments opposed to this proposal. And these were all primarily based on concerns of the tax burden shift. Commissioners, following any public comment or testimony, I'm asking the Planning Commission to recommend the approval of the classification of 76.96 acres of the Gorgas property as open space land for current use assessment. Thank you.
All right. We will move to testimony. Daniel Bryan, I know you've already given comment during the open public comment part, but you are welcome to again give comments for the public hearing if you would like.
No need to, there's nothing else I really need to say.
That's fine. I
And
just
just
want to make
like
sure I
she
give you
said,
the
the public
opportunity.
comments were, about the taxes being increased on the neighborhood, which I don't think is fair or right.
Understood. Okay. Are there any, I see we have one person online then who would like to give a comment. That is Howard. Howard, we're going to promote you to a panelist. And then we encourage you to unmute yourself. You will have 3 minutes for comment. It may take a second to get you promoted, so. All right, you should be able to turn your camera on and unmute. We can see you, Howard, and we can hear you. You're good.
All right, I was going to make a mention, you were talking about water conservation. Tacoma Power was required by their FERC license to run Alder Dam no lower than 10 feet below capacity from Memorial Day to Labor Day. They never did, and until after I pointed out that they caused a flood by raising the water in the wintertime unnecessarily. And I sent that complaint into FERC, and it, from then on, Tacoma Power has always conserved water in the summer, in the spring and summer. They still don't have any rules about flood mitigation. What I wanted to point out, this is just a lead into what I really wanted to say, is in the flood hazard mitigation plan that's just been done, there's a comment that says not the Nisqually River flood impacts. The flood of record is 17.3 feet from February 8th, 1996. The National Weather Service issues a flood warning for the Nisqually River forecast and indicates when the river will reach a stage of 12 feet or higher in McKenna. Well, that is the 1996 flood is not the flood of record. The real flood of record is in November of 2006, when the entrance to Paradise Park was shut down for over a year. It was the worst flood in well more than a century. So that's the flood that should be mentioned in the flood hazard mitigation plan. The reservoir was not, the flood ended at Alder Dam. The dam was 53 feet below capacity mainly because Tacoma Power used up all the water in the dam instead of preserving it. And when the flood hit, it raised 37 feet to be 16 feet below capacity. So I think the flood hazard mitigation plan should at least have a comment that the 2006 flood was worse, but it was mitigated. In fact, it was the worst flood in the Nisqually Valley history. That's it.
All right.
Bing, I finished on.
Thank you very much, Howard.
Thank you.
I don't believe we have any further comment online or in the room. If that's the case, then I will call the hearing to a close, and we'll move on to work session and recommendation. So we did have a work session last meeting on this topic. I think we discussed it pretty thoroughly. We have received one additional comment since then. Do folks have discussion that they would like to have on this? Go ahead, Commissioner Halverson.
I'd like Marissa, if you would, to go over the tax implications again, because we've had several pieces of testimony about that specific item, and we all heard it back in July, that it really is a very minimal amount. So I think the public needs to hear that again.
Yes. And I will say, to the beginning, I am by no means an expert in tax assessment, but I'll do my best to explain this. Yeah, because we have run this to the ground in the past and received information from the Chief Deputy Assessor of the Assessor's Office, who shared information from Department of Revenue. That basically it explains that Washington's property tax system works on a budget-based system. And each county assessor each year is responsible for determining the maximum amount each tax district in the county can levy. So basically, once they know that this limitation, the levy amount is divided by the district's total taxable value to arrive at the levy rate per $1,000 taxable value. So it's based on basically the total value of all properties within a taxing district. So it's not that the burden shift is just among the neighbors, it's within an entire tax district. And they've basically, you would have the tax levy rate divided by total value times 1,000 to come up with what the levy rate is. And we've been provided examples by a Department of Revenue and in which, say, a taxing district had 4 parcels. I mean, that's generally not going to be the case. It would be a lot more. And in this scenario, each parcel had a taxable value of $700,000. But one of those properties was enrolled in the open space program and received current use rather than highest and best use value for their property. So basically, instead of the full development potential for the value of the property, it's based on how it's currently being used or managed, which would be agreeing not to develop. And as a result, the levy rates changed from like $1.05 per $1,000 to $1.33 per each individual property tax owner. So it's generally very minimal, but there are a lot of factors like the size of the taxing district and levy rates and improvements on the properties, which would affect their value.
Do we know the size of this taxing district and what its total value is?
Actually, I do not know that. That is a very good question. I'd be glad to produce the information.
Go ahead, Commissioner Halverson.
I'd just like to state for the record that as a member of that district and a property owner in that district, I support this open space program and this particular application. And as a member of that district, I will too be taxed just a little bit more for my property out there. But the open space program is a unique program, and I think it's well worth it for all of us out there. So, and I am the planning commissioner for your district, sir. So if you want to talk to me afterwards, I'd be glad to talk to you.
All right. Any additional comment?
Do we know if Mr. LeBron's math here was accurate? Letter?
I would have to reread the letter. I should have printed out a copy. I know it was covering quite a few topics.
Specific to the taxes, the tax savings for the Gorgas and the shift of tax burden to the rest of the taxing district. It kind of looks like it's just under $4,000 per year that would be shifted to the rest of the district roughly. And so I don't necessarily need exact numbers or anything, but is it roughly $4,000 that will be shifted to the rest of the district? And I guess that backs up to my last question. Was the rest of the district millions of dollars worth of taxes that $4,000 going to get pushed back into, or is it, $20,000 that $4,000 is going to get pushed back into? My concerns are similar to Commissioner Halverson's here, that when these taxing decisions are made on the decision makers, it feels a whole lot better, but I'm feeling more and more squishy about making taxing decisions that I will not bear. But I would probably feel better about it if I found out that these folks that are going to have these tax burdens pushed to them, it really is a nominal amount of money. But if it's real money to these people, even, in the matter of $100, that's a big deal. If it's a matter of $5, and maybe it shouldn't matter philosophically, but it does to me practically. So knowing exactly how it's going to affect the neighbors is an interesting piece of information to have.
Yes, and I didn't try to run numbers from Mr. LeBron's comments. I could say in the Department of Revenue example, in which there were 4 parcels, it ended up being just under, I think it was just under a $200 tax increase. But generally, there would be more properties and more variability in the values.
Well, I can understand like Mr. Halverson's position. If 80 acres next door to me is all of a sudden preserved in open space and it cost me a few bucks, I would gladly pay a few bucks for that. But if it was costing me a few $1,000s, I might think differently about it.
Yeah, I've never heard of any cases where it came to that much more. It was maybe a couple.
I don't think so
hundred at
either,
the
but
most.
without knowing how big the taxing district is and the value of that taxing district, it's hard to know.
Just to, this letter does say that he reached out to Dorena Baird at Thurston County's assessors, and their tax burden projected is to go from 2,556 to 1,278. So we're talking, if this is accurate, and I have no reason to disbelieve that, of less than $1,300 distributed over everyone per year.
Yeah, and if it's 4 houses, that's one thing. If it's 400 houses, it's nothing, it's something else.
You have a light grasp, but how many houses would you guess are in that area?
Probably 200 or 300.
200 or 300?
in that taxing district.
Yeah.
I don't know how the taxing district is
Yeah.
even defined.
I don't know how they define it either, but I know
Yeah.
that area out there very well.
So assuming on the conservative end of 200, we're talking $6.
Yeah,
I think that's worth it.
I would probably agree with you, but since I don't know how big that taxing district is, it's hard for me to know.
Probably also enhanced property value for whoever is lucky enough to be
does.
next door to that. Enhanced aquifer charging,
Mhm.
it's the list of monetary and non-monetary benefits is probably quite substantial.
Yeah, because you know it's never gonna be developed.
Yep.
I agree, and if it was in my neighborhood, I would wholeheartedly do it. I think it's a fantastic program. I'm glad that the program is available. Just philosophically, I have a hard time saying that I want to push one man's tax burden onto somebody else,
All right.
even if it's nominal.
Well, if we are done with comment, then I would entertain a motion to, or can you read that again? You had the exact acreage that, for the
Oh, yes.
recommendation.
It's at 76.96 acres.
That many acres? And send along our recommendation of an approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
All right, can we call roll?
Commissioner Casino,
Nay.
Commissioner Halverson,
Okay, yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Bartlett,
Aye.
Vice Chair or Chair Bombardes,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishburne.
Aye.
Commissioner Kaiser,
aye.
Commissioner Nelson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson online.
Aye.
Okay, so we have 8 yays,
And
1
one
nay.
against. Motion passes. All right. We should be able to then move on to, well, move back to, work session 39 on Thurston 2045. We were on chapter 9, and Commissioner Bartlett, you still had items you wish to discuss on that.
Just tying together some of it sounded like we were getting a lot of specific requests about something that's actually a little bit more general. Like if we're talking about beavers, we're talking about sedimentation and stuff like that. A lot of that comes down to key species, like what would be defined as a keystone species. And I was looking through, and we do touch on this a little bit in a couple of spots, but it might be worth highlighting something like pursue programs and policies that protect and support species that have a disproportionate effect on maintaining fish and wildlife habitat or improving water quality.
So it's new language you're proposing?
That's new language I'm proposing. It just seems like it would be something that gets at those specific interests without,
Sorry, could you repeat that again a little more slowly?
Sure. Just giving it for example, pursue programs and policies that protect and support species which have a disproportionate effect on maintaining fish and wildlife habitats and water quality. That would be things like, yeah.
So we have a policy addition proposed by Commissioner Bartlett. Do we have a second on that? All right, any discussion on this? It seems a fairly straightforward policy to me, but I'm curious what folks in the room think.
Can you restate the motion?
Go ahead. It's a policy addition to chapter 9. And it would, if you could read it one more time.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely, yeah. Pursue programs and policies that protect and support species which have a disproportionate effect in maintaining fish and wildlife habitat and water quality.
What are some animals that?
That would be like beavers, that would be like, think about, well, things that protect kelp and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um,
So actual wildlife that helps support
Yeah,
wanna
well,
call
it doesn't have to be wildlife, actually. It can be like a lot of there are a lot of trees or like even
Okay.
one guy that
Plants,
would
yeah.
count under that.
Trees are wildlife, aren't they? Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Kind
yeah,
of.
depending on people think of charismatic megafauna and a lot of keystone species are, but a lot of them are like a fungus, you know?
We separate fish and wildlife at the state level, so.
Yeah, and the reason I went for maintaining fish and wildlife habitats and water quality is that was just the language I was seeing in other policies. But yeah, I wanted to say keystone species, but I didn't want to add another phrase that we needed to add a glossary definition to at the end, so. I went with.
Friendly amendment,
Yeah,
consider, instead of the word disproportionate, which was, kind of has a negative feeling, how about, species that are essential or critically important to?
yeah, I like that. I would go with, yeah,
Of critical importance?
critical importance, yeah. Like that.
All right. Sir, you're accepting the friendly amendment?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? I think we can probably voice vote this one. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All
Aye.
opposed? All right, so that's one addition to chapter 9. All right, are we good now with that addition to move or to give 9 the thumbs up and move on to 10? Again, it's not a binding vote on 9. This is just,
Yeah.
we've covered the big things. Okay, cool. So moving on to chapter 10. I'm not sure if you're ready, Maya, but this one is very light. There was only one major comment theme, and that was to consider adding a policy that requires pre-ground disturbance site investigations for site where the DAHP predictive model shows cultural resources are likely. And I would love to hear more about what that means.
Yeah, so this is FutureWise submitted this comment, and what I will say is the DAP predictive model is a model that's online, and it shows which areas are kind of like the highest risk, high risk, moderate risk, and low risk. And in Thurston County, a lot of our land falls into that high risk category. I was not easily able to pull an acreage of that. But this would essentially require like a pre-ground disturbance survey. The challenge to that is we don't require SEPA for all sorts of developments. Like if you're going to go put a individual single family home, there is a condition with that if you find anything while you're building it, then you're supposed to stop work. But there's not like a full archaeological review that's required as part of that. So requiring a pre-ground disturbance survey adds expense to the homeowners that go in for those types of permits. And from the county side, it could be potentially challenging to ensure compliance with. So I think it's certainly something, we could investigate in the future, but there are definitely challenges to including a policy like that at this time. For land use changes, we do use the predictive model. We look at that when we're doing when we get rezone requests and land use changes. So that's something that we use for our work on the long range planning side. But in terms of permit projects, the addition to the owners would be pretty substantial for small builders and small landowners.
Okay, Mr. Bartlett?
Would it make sense to have something like that with a size limit? I mean, I'm thinking if like statistically, if someone's dealing with a large property, there's a likelier chance that there's gonna be something in there, but someone just putting in a house addition, that wouldn't necessarily be an issue.
Yeah,
Rural
potentially.
county, so it's not big land disturbing things happening in a rural county.
Yeah.
And if we're doing like a big business, that's most likely going to have a notice period and stuff anyway, yeah. It sounds like this is something that if we did implement it, it would be almost unenforceable because we don't have resources to do it. Not that it's an inherently bad idea, it's just difficult to implement and would increase housing development costs for folks.
Yeah, as it stands right now, all of our notices of applications for permits are sent to all of the tribes that they're part of our parties of record. And same goes for SEPA. And so if tribes were to comment that they want that to be a condition of the SEPA, that is something that we currently do. So we, like Maya was saying, that's something
I didn't know we
a
did that.
smidgen of this. Current planning is very different from the work that you all have been looking at on the long range side. So there's a lot that goes into that. And then if it's a condition of the SEPA determination, it's a condition of the permit. And again, like Maya said, reiterating, if anything is discovered,
They
then the
have that
development has to
obligation.
stop.
I'm satisfied with that.
I think what we have isn't perfect, but it fits our resource envelope essentially, so. Any objections to giving section 10 the thumbs up and moving on? All right, chapter 11. Or 11,
Chapter 11 is the health chapter, and
oh,
so
which, no changes to the health chapter, so chapter 12, the big
chapter
one.
12, the big one. So we have talked a lot about climate already. These are the climate pieces that are not related to their Thurston climate mitigation plan. So just to cover that very briefly, we received a couple of comments that asked for policy updates from Department of Fish and Wildlife. Most of those we've included. They've kind of aligned with the language that we've already had in there on wildlife corridors, and they really just beefed that up to be consistent with their plan. There was a request, this is a specific future-wise one, to add the California Coastal Commission sea level rise guidance as a specific reference in policy and implementation plan. We did go ahead and include that after consulting with the water resources team. Just kind of as a matter of background, that's fairly well regarded as one of the most comprehensive and science grounded frameworks that exists for local governments right now. So it's fairly well used across the board, and it would be something that we could look at in the future. We did add some language into the policy and the implementation plan that says, or other best available science as appropriate. So we're ensuring we have a little bit of flexibility if things change over the next 5 years and there's new guidance that comes out. We don't want to be stuck with one thing. We want to be able to consider whatever the best is out there procedurally. We also received comments on updating policies related to natural hazards, sea level rise, and habitat migration. We have included the habitat migration, wildlife migration language in the climate chapter now. And we did add some new language and implementation plan action items on natural hazards, specifically on extreme heat and refuge cooling. So there's some new language in the plan on that. And then finally, we received some requests for partnership on community forests, and there have been some tweaks to policies to better reflect that request. So at this time, we don't have any other points that we're waiting for decisions on from the Planning Commission in the climate chapter, but I will open it up to you all if you want to have a discussion.
I will say, we have spent a enormous amount of time on this, and I don't say that to detract from it. I think we have produced probably one of the best climate chapters that we're going to be handing off to the Board of Commissioners, and they should feel good about that, and hopefully we'll give our deliberation the thumbs up it approves on their end. Do we have any additional comment on the climate chapter? Go ahead, Commissioner Halverson.
2 comments, Maya, just for clarification on my part. The FutureWise folks had a policy change called CL-1.A.8. Direct growth away from natural hazards created or aggravated by climate change. Is that one of the ones you were talking about?
I don't think we have specifically included that policy.
Okay.
No, we did not include that carte blanche in the plan.
Okay. Is it covered by another one?
I think we have other policies that generally speak to that. It's not specific to any one climate impact. It covers them more generally. So FutureWise here is really hitting on like the sea level rise and the wildland urban interface based on, having read their comment letter. But we talk about that more generally in the climate chapter, and we do have policies that talk about appropriateness for land use and zoning and considering changes to those in order to mitigate for those climate impacts.
So the one you were referencing was CL-7.A.8, which says identify where wetlands, marshes, and vegetation will be able to migrate upland as sea level Sizes
So
and design, locate, et cetera.
that is also not one that we included specific. Actually, Amelia, can you recall that one? I'm not sure. I know the habitat migration was in the narrative, and that's where we put all of that language in. We added like a paragraph that talks about how climate impacts will shift migration patterns, both for bird species, wildlife, and then other plant species. It was not a specific policy that we added to my recollection.
No, we did like plan for sea level rise is more the language we used. And we did talk about, so we used similar language to what they did with our consultant. Where vegetation, wetlands, marshes may be able to migrate, because we can't tell for sure. Inland rather than upland, and then establishing development, siting and setback standards for development and redevelopment that allow for necessary movement of habitat and vegetation. So we,
Just a wording
Smithed
change.
it.
yeah, we altered it to fit more with what we're doing.
And I would say the current draft of the SMP does a very good job of leaving space.
It
for-
does, and that was my point previously, about a month ago, about the SMP and using that as a document for reference in here.
And we also have more information in the environment, recreation, and open space chapter. We've got a section on natural hazards to mitigate damage and harm to communities.
Well, that was my note, is, you know, we should be referencing the SMP because that's a major document that goes hand in hand with this. Okay, cool, thank you.
Any additional comment on the climate chapter, or are we ready to give it the thumbs up and move on?
I think that the only thing that I have with that is just that the comment that Ms. Norton made earlier today,
It wasn't for the climate chapter.
No, it wasn't. It was, but it was relevant to the climate chapter, but it would be worth revisiting utilities to bring that up, but I'm happy with the climate as it is.
I would suggest, as we discussed at last meeting, if we have additions to chapters that we've already passed on, that we submit actual language in writing and then discuss it as an agenda item for the next meeting. I think that's the easiest way to just one and done it.
I like that.
Sound good?
Also, all comments that have been received after the public hearing are passed on to the board too. So Betsy Norton's comments will be provided to the board along with comments we've received since April.
Okay, so moving on to, it appears, Appendix B. And I think this is actually where that climate, the California coastal climate sea level rise ended up getting integrated, not in the climate chapter directly.
Yep, that's correct. I think most of this we've already chatted about, but we have made a lot of changes to the implementation plan. Most of that is from the work that you all did as a planning commission over the last several meetings in May and June on the climate chapter. Beyond that, we had a few small changes on DFW comments, and then there has been, I'm trying to remember if this is part of that. There has been a addition of tools to reduce rural growth, and that was a request of one of the public comments we received. And we basically just copied from the Smart Growth Index from Puget Sound Partnership, which was a comment that we were referencing. So the comment asked us to include that language specifically, and we added that in there. I'm not recalling anything else from the implementation plan, but I'll check with Amelia and Anna just to make sure I'm not missing anything on that.
It looks like there were two, so the comment themes were to increase the urgency of climate related metrics, and we did a good bit of that work. There was one about adding, quote, water for an agriculture as a docket item to the implementation plan. Not 100% sure what that is. Make all public reports and monitoring data available online. Reduce housing capacity in the rural area, you covered that. And then add to the implementation plan item to review and strengthen codes relating to prime soils. It doesn't look like, so of those things, the two decision points are, do we want to add new metrics to the implementation plan to address water for agriculture? I'm not sure exactly what that would look like?
And I will say we do have a implementation plan metric that talks about water banking and programmatic water storage as a whole. It is not specific to agriculture, it's more general in nature so that we can just begin exploring that as a county. The ask of these public comments is to have one that focuses specifically on agricultural water banking and those rights. So yeah, I mean, it's certainly something the Planning Commission can consider. I think we have general enough action items in there already to capture that, but it's just, do we want to go so far to have a separate one for ag?
Commissioner Nelson, I'd hate to put you on the spot, but as our resident agricultural entrepreneur, it would be great if you could give some of your feedback on that idea.
I agree with what, I think I agree with what I was hearing from Maya, that, I mean, and I think I've made this clear before, this is comp plan, big overarching ideas, and I really don't like to get into specific things like that. So I think doing water banking is a general thing in here. And then when we get to it, if we want to just look at something, we have the language in the comp plan that says we can do it.
Yeah, so we already have permission. If we want to get specific later, we can.
Yeah, that would be my position on it.
I mean, I'm inclined to defer to Commissioner Nelson on that. Anyone have strong feelings that we should be changing that? No? Okay, and then the other one was to add new item to review development codes around prime soils and agriculture. Any strong desires here to address prime soils?
We did a bunch of prime soil stuff.
I remember you guys talking about this.
So I'd let sleeping dogs lie on that one.
All right. There was also a bullet here that says, determine a time frame of implementing the 5% rural growth. Implementing a 5% rural growth goal means downsizing in the rural area, as well as more partnerships with the cities to accommodate growth there. This will determine what, quote, alternative we are moving forward in the SEIS. So implement with this periodic update is an action alternative. Implement 5% within the next 1 to 5 or 5 to 10 years, which is a modified action alternative, or consider updates on a 10 to 20 year time frame. Maya, could you give a little more context to that particular?
Yeah, and so I will say we have all of the policies in the plan that go for a 5% rural growth, but the population projections and the housing allocations, because they need to align regionally with our partners in the cities, they reflect the sustainable Thurston, which is a 14%. So the question for the Planning Commission is, what is the urgency behind this item? Based on our past conversations, I would say that I think we're probably on the 1 to 5 year time frame, but I want to hear it from the horse's mouth. And the time frame with that will also determine what types of tools we can potentially use. So just as an example, some of the tools we already have in place are like just land conservation, conservation futures, transfer of development rights, purchase of development rights. And then there are a new set of tools, things like performance metrics that are tied to watershed plans. A new overlay zone that prioritizes resource uses as the primary use, and then single family becomes the secondary use. And those types of tools may take, a couple years to implement. We would need to do research and potentially get some programs set up before we can implement those. And of course, there would be a full legislative process associated with anything. So we're not really in a position to do something by December of this year, but the ask for the Planning Commission is, what is the time frame for us to start implementing those tools? Is it as soon as we finish this periodic update, or do you want us to take a more strategic approach? And is it okay if we're in the 3 to 6 year time frame?
So speaking personally here, I think the 1 to 5 time frame makes sense, right? It would be highly disruptive and probably ineffective to start trying to do this immediately without some study about how you would implement it. These the tools that you'll need to be crafted over time to be effective, right? Because small but mighty county government, right? We gotta leverage what we can. So I personally, I'm thinking the 1 to 5 year range, but I'm interested to hear where folks are at on that.
One of the concerns I have is I know that we're moving into doing our joint development code stuff soon. And I think that that is going to inform this more than a lot of other things might. And I would like to really see how joint development code finishes up and what kind of pushback we might be getting from our municipal partners before we really know what we can do in the county. So I would like to have the space to finish off what we do with the cities and then figure out how we're gonna take care of the county, because otherwise I think we might be setting ourselves up for failure where we push ourselves into a corner and the next thing you know, we're never gonna be able to hit our goals.
What is the timeline for those joint development codes over the next 2 years?
I'm working on them as we speak. We're taking a slightly different approach than in the past, because I recognize we don't permit our UGAs for right now. Our UGA codes are incredibly out of date and our permitting staff is permitting based on the codes that we have adopted, which are not in alignment with the city's codes. And so taking into consideration the fact that much of the housing allocations have been pushed to the cities and their UGAs, we're trying to tweak the way that we approach the joint codes. I'm working on them. The goal I've given myself is I'm working with the cities. It's also dependent upon some of them are phasing their, they know there are some development code changes that they can get adopted with their comp plan this year and some that might happen in the first quarter of next year. I want this done by fall of next year at the very latest. I've already met with Lacey and Tumwater. Not that Olympia is not important, but we are mostly permitting in in Lacey and Tumwater's UGAs. And we're having a lot of back and forth and it's gonna be a very collaborative effort, but they're on board with the approach that I've.
So you're looking at 3 years from now in 2027 to have all that done.
No.
It's all of 2026 is what I heard.
Yes.
2027 is like not 3 years.
No,
That-
2 years.
It's
A year and a half.
2.5, yeah.
The other thing I would mention on the joint codes is when we're thinking about 5%, there's like we keep people from build it like at that threshold. And there's also how do you make it more attractive to build in a place like a UGA?
Yeah.
So that's another part of this whole equation. There are a lot of different dials that we can turn.
Yeah.
So it's not even just let's wait and see what happens with those. That's a tool to help us get there.
That's what I'm getting at. I mean, I don't know. I know that generally speaking, the cities they're the lead on these joint codes. And if their densities for UGA aren't as high as we'd like them to take the pressure off the rural, I want to know that first so we can really start putting pressure on the cities and telling them, no, we need to up our density in the UGA so that way we can take this pressure off the rural. But without knowing that first, I think it could be problematic if we don't do that first.
So it sounds like joint planning would basically be done in a 1.5-ish.
A year and a half, I think, is a long estimate based on
The longest. So if we targeted 1 to 5, that would still give us almost 4 years of time for crafting that response in a way that's well informed. So I think 1 to 5 is appealing in that, but I'm curious, does anyone else have? Go ahead, Commissioner Nelson.
I'm just gonna say I have very little faith in the cities. Density. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I also will say I have very little faith in our county commissioners because they have them the way growth management is set up. Thurston County, the counties are the planning authorities. The way Thurston County is set up, they have just passed that off to the cities.
Sort of abdicating the responsibility.
We've been through this before where we're trying to do stuff in the UGAs and we're being told, oh, that's not what the city wants. It shouldn't matter except we have this memorandum of understanding. And so, I mean, I see if we say, okay, we're gonna do this in 1 to 5 years, I see a definite position where in 5 years, we're going out and telling people in the county, you can't build because we have too much growth in the county. And it's not because the county's growing so fast, it's because the cities refuse to. I mean, there's been a big density push in the cities recently because the legislature passed laws that mandated it. So are we going to tell everybody in rural Thurston County, well, we've had 30 years of growth management and the cities have not wanted to do anything that's not mandated by the legislature. So we're gonna push back on you again and tell you that your property is now not going to be as valuable because the cities don't want people in the cities and they don't want people in the rural county. So where are we gonna put people? And an example I'll give, which isn't, I think the state law has changed that now, but an example I'll give is the transfer of development rights program. That was set up, you know, in 1995 to take the properties that were zoned long-term ag and went from 1 to 5 to 1 to 20. They were given, your development rights were still transferable to receiving areas. Well, when you talk to the builders in Olympia and Tumwater and Lacey, you know why they didn't want them? Because of regulations in the cities. They could, if they were zoned 4 to 8, they could probably only build 5 or 6 units on that property. So what was the point of doing anything?
You couldn't achieve the density that you want.
There was no market for the development rights, and I can tell you as somebody well, at least my family's had transfer of development rights since 1995. The only calls we get are about buying the property, not about buying the development rights from us. So.
Okay.
I think one other thing to mention when we're talking about this 5% goal, it comes from the Sustainable Thurston Plan. And when we think about what it's really trying to achieve, it's trying to make sure that we have a lighter impact on the land, that we're making sure that development is happening in places that it's easier to accommodate with services. And I think one of the other things that we can do beyond, like, zoning is a really blunt instrument. And there are a lot of other dials that we can turn. I think we've mentioned some of them, but just to be clear, some of these, we could hit a higher than a 5% growth rate, but have less than that 5% impact on the land. So there are ways that we can think about how we develop, not just where we develop, that can help achieve some of those goals if we're thinking about the myriad tools that we could use
Do we
to.
really have metrics for measuring development impact outside of like single family home development?
We could model it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things that I found when I came to the county is we have a fully built out land use model that EPA built for us, where we could actually go into like a watershed and figure out what happens if we change different development patterns or if we change different development standards. So we can do all sorts of different things. And the other thing that we can do if we think about what this 5% meant to people, a big part of it is like rural character. Like we want to maintain the character of like the rural character. The other piece is we want to make sure that we're preserving the environment. And we can also decouple some of those because there are some ways that we can have like rural character can be its own thing and the environmental impact can be its own thing. And we can solve for those with different tools. So honestly, it's a really exciting thing to me to think about being able to really dig into what it means when we make decisions about where people are on the landscape or what that development looks like. So I could talk about this for hours.
It sounds like the toolbox has a lot of tools in it. And that's very encouraging. So it's not like we're building things from scratch in that. So I think that further supports the 1 to 5.
If we're using this 5% goal as our proxy for protecting rural development and protecting the environment, how do you turn a policy, how do you write a policy that says we're not going to use that as a proxy, we're actually going to use these metrics to determine whether or not we still have rural character or we're protecting the environment?
I think some of our draft motions will get at that a little bit. We have language in there that talks about, you know, is this kind of a mandatory across the board reduction in available land, or are we looking at incentive based and performance metric based? So we can certainly include language that speaks to that in the motion around the 5%.
Yeah, my understanding is this is a goal.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, you know, if we say 5% of the growth is because we will accept that much loss of rural character and we will accept that much loss of environmental function. But we can actually, if we were able to quantify those losses, but we actually got 7 or 8 or 10% density, but it was still at the 5% amount of cost, then I would love to see something like that.
I think we still have the flexibility to define what a 5% goal means after we agree to the 5% goal.
Well, 5% goal says that 5% of the growth has to happen, so that would be counted by the number of homes that are built.
You could do something like speak to the objectives of the 5% goal.
I like that better.
So this conversation is getting a little away from what we're trying to get here. We're deep diving into the how, when really the first question we're trying to tackle is the time frame. Do we think that it makes sense immediately, 1 to 5 year time frame, or do we need to go further out than that? Commissioner Bartlett?
Maya had mentioned earlier that putting specific and early timeframes on things opens up the timeframe opens up specific tools. And I'm wondering if having that greater urgency on there does increase our negotiating strength in certain contexts when we're talking about trying to work with the cities, or has other tools that are available for that.
Maya, is that something you could answer?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, at least in the conversations I've had with the cities, they feel that they have implemented density changes to accommodate this. It's that the rural county needs to make changes in our land use and zoning. And so I know there's a push and pull to that, but we're not going to see density in the cities until it becomes a more financial incentive to develop in those areas, and you know it's just too costly to do in the rural area. So I think there's definitely conversations we can have. You know, having that shorter time frame potentially puts those joint code updates as a vessel for that. We're going to have to do a redo of the housing chapters in our joint plans for our UGAs. So all of those are tools that we can potentially hit on this in the next 5 years.
I think it gives us incentives for more density in the UGAs too, doesn't it?
Yeah. And my follow-up, I guess, was going to be that I've talked to a couple of people who happen to be intersecting with the Tumwater Planning Commission. And I would be, there are 2 sets of planning, well, like 5 sets of planning commissions, but there are multiple sets of planning commissions that are all working on similar projects, kind of very tenuously connected with each other. I'm interested in working a little bit more directly with some of our fellows in the cities if we want to achieve some of these goals.
Yeah. So
just to Scott's point.
Just to sort of bring it in here, I feel like have folks that wanted to express where they're at on this had a chance to speak on it. I would be interested in a temperature check, not a binding vote, on the 1 to 5 year frame.
So that would be the short term versus the midterm.
Not the absolute shortest, but so not immediate, but 1 to 5 years. And that would give us time to do joint planning, it to be informed by joint planning. Where are you at, Joel, on this? Are you a thumbs up?
I'm a thumbs up on 1 to 5. Remembering that the work expands to fit the time available.
It really does, particularly in government
Kind
work.
of where I'm at with it.
I can speak to that.
Yeah. Yes, you can.
Yeah, I can. Commissioner Nelson and Kaiser are.
I think it's gonna take longer, and I'm a little hesitant to put such a hard ceiling on it at 5 years. I mean, there's things coming that we don't know about, like you just talked about, Derek, this incredible modeling that you could do. And I don't want to run up into this deadline when we have potential to do a more strategic, more thoughtful analysis. I guess that'll always be the case, but
You're always gonna be balancing the urgency of the climate versus the desire to do it the best way. You know, it's one of those, can we let the perfect be the enemy of the good situations? So I only saw 5 thumbs up, so we're not at 6 for 1 to 5. Would folks feel more comfortable, if we already know that joint planning is going to take basically the next 2 years, if we instead did like a 2 to 6?
yes,
Would people be more comfortable with 2 to 6?
2 to 7. That's
Six
5 years.
isn't much different.
That's 5 years. 5 years.
I mean, Maya also mentioned 3 to 6 as an option.
I think about what an implementation schedule would look like along with like an iterative process.
Mhm.
So, that's probably what I would ask for,
How long of an implementation are you imagining on that?
2045. Like it's a long-term project, especially if we're turning dials speculatively. We'd wanna come back to it and see whether it's working or not.
Do you think it'd come back every time we did joint planning? Or would we want to do this more often?
So I can speak to that a little bit. We would definitely assess this with our buildable lands update, because that's exactly what that update does, and that happens on a 10-year cycle. Beyond that, we have kind of a 5-year implementation plan report that we now have to do on the comp plan. So we could potentially tie this into like a 5-year, just look at it, see how we're doing. In terms of this time frame that we're putting on it, I don't think that, if we're saying 1 to 5, I don't think 5 is the hard stop. I think 1 to 5 implies that we are going to start pursuing these options over the next 1 to 5 years. Not necessarily that we're going to be finishing them, because like Derek says, we're going to be turning the dial on this potentially for the next 20 years. We might not even see that we're reaching our 5% goal by 2045, but we want to see progress towards that. So
Did that change your thought process on that, understanding that 1 to 5 is when we start implementing, not when we're hard limiting? Are people more comfortable with 1 to 5 with that in mind?
I like the terminology that's in the slide where it says in the short term, midterm, or long term. I like the midterm.
I dislike ambiguity. I think ambiguity is the enemy when we are looking at things of environmental importance.
We've had experience with all the cities, many of us, and like Commissioner Nelson said, they rule the roost when it comes to the joint planning, which it shouldn't be that way, but it needs to change, but that's because of our county commissioners, no other reason.
I mean, we can potentially be a more vocal body in that.
I have been vocal.
It's a resource issue.
I mean, I guess if there's like more than one
Yeah.
vocalizing.
I feel like my impression, because again, I'm only in my first term on this, is that there has been a shift on this body in how willing we are to be vocal on things like that. I could be wrong.
No,
I would not agree with that.
no,
No?
no. We were very vocal the last
Yeah.
round.
I think that the problem that you run into, if the county doesn't want to take back over the joint planning because of the resources that it requires, it basically costs 1 or 2 FTEs per jurisdiction, and if the jurisdictions will take that on, and then we just have to say, yes, we like what you did.
Yeah.
It's cheaper for the county. That might be an unfair way to describe it, but that's the way it sure feels like when I'm being thought of as the redheaded stepchild in the room by the cities.
I would put it even more simply. How many people live in the cities? How many people live in the rural county? And what do you have to do to become a county commissioner? You have to get votes. To me, that's it, plain and simple.
Yeah, so they abdicate their responsibilities in that direction. Quite
I
frankly.
still think we should give a number to this, and I think the majority of us think at least some numbers should be on this. So I'm just gonna throw out there, with the new understanding of how implementation works and understanding that the first year is not going to be implementation, it's going to be doing joint planning. How do we feel about 2 to 6 now? Can I get a temperature check on 2 to 6?
I'll go along with 2 to 6, but
Yeah, if we're
got the
talking
deal
about
done.
pursuing,
Mhm.
I'm okay with
So
that.
anyone against 2 to 6? I know Commissioner Halverson, you'd prefer not a number on this.
I mean, it's irrelevant to me. I just know what we're gonna be up against in the next year and a half to 2 years for the cities. I mean, I just had a conversation with the city of Yelm.
Yeah, and I guess I'm interested in using this as one of the many tools to try to like push back on some of the cities on this, because I agree with you.
Well, that's what I was doing in my conversation.
Well, I would point out, my concern with that, Commissioner Bartlett, is that the cities at this point are not required to comply with the comp plan. The county is, so whenever we pass something, you know, if it's not getting done, somebody can take us to the hearings board. And I mean, and this was kind of my concern originally with the 1 to 5, was if we aren't there in 5 years, somebody can take us to the hearings board and they can completely shut down development in Thurston County, because it's happened before.
And I guess the understanding we have now is that the time frame is for implementing, it is not for hitting.
Yeah.
Which makes a
So
big difference.
I don't hear a strong no on 2 to 6.
I would just add the word implementing in there, in the motion.
So
Developing or implementing?
Well, you know, move to recommend the county pursue incentive-based and performance-based changes to achieve 5% growth, implementing.
I'll add language that says to start implementation and pursue changes.
3 to 6 years or 2 to 6 years.
2 to 6.
Okay.
Okay. So we're all,
Yep.
okay, we did it, folks. We have consensus. It's not easy, but we did it. All right,
And that is probably the hardest piece of that, in my opinion, that's the hardest decision point that you all will have to make. I think that 5% goal is kind of the big one, right? So so thank you for that. Great
yeah,
job.
I'm gonna take a look at the agenda where we're at time-wise. We are at 8:07. We're not scheduled to hit update until 8:35. I think next was what, development regulations, Maya? Oh.
Development regulations, and this is the last thing on our list before we go back to housing and utilities. I would love to get through this because these are a lot of heavy changes that Anna and I will have to go back and make throughout the draft. So,
One moment, Maya, I just wanna, go ahead, Commissioner Fishburne.
I think there's a typo in item 25. You can't adjourn after we discuss.
Oh, you're right. It probably was intended to be 8:25 because we can't adjourn at 8:30 if we have a meeting. Okay, so with that understanding, we have 22-ish or 15-ish minutes. Okay, let's see if we can get through development regulations, Maya, and then next meeting, we can just do the stuff we have to go back to.
yeah, that'd be great. So, covering the development regulations, I think I may have miscopied in the original memo. There is changes that have been made in response to public comment. We didn't make any changes to the development regulations in response to public comment. What I will say is on the side, I have had a kind of a stakeholder group with the cities for a specific section of the code change, and they have worked through on fire safety regulations specific to the clean energy code. So I have gone in and made some changes related to that. It's mostly to reiterate fire safety provisions that are already included in state law. And so the next version of the draft will reflect all of that through that stakeholder process with the cities and the fire districts. So decision points for the Planning Commission in your development regulations. We have a couple of decision points. The first one is on detached ADUs and whether or not we want to allow them. The current draft does allow detached ADUs in the rural area, not needing not needing the additional density to comply. So if you have a 1 to 5 acre lot, you can have a single family residence and your a detached ADU, as the draft stands today. We're looking for direction on density bonuses and clusters. That provision is in the code. We did receive some comments asking that that be delayed until a future time, primarily with concerns over just the lot size that like the highest density bonus would result in. It would result in like a 1/10 of an acre lot, which the public commenters were concerned is more of the type of lot you would see in the UGA area. Direction on parking requirements. So right now for multifamily, and this mostly pertains to Grand Mound urban growth area, we have a range of 0 parking spaces per unit required to 1.5 spaces per unit required. The Planning Commission asked for that range to be included. We didn't get any specific public comment on that other than one in favor of more reduced or 0 parking requirements, just generally speaking, because it's better for transportation trends. And then the final point is on real estate disclosures and the military influence overlay. We didn't get any comment on this specifically, but we had done some presentations to some stakeholder groups on this. And the feedback that we got was take out the real estate disclosures clause and do that as a regional effort. So right now that is in the draft only because that is what the South Sound Military Community Partnership provided in their draft. But based on the feedback we got from our real estate community, I would probably recommend that the Planning Commission consider eliminating that. So those are the decision points, and let's jump right in.
All right. So direction on detached ADUs, I think we were fairly in agreement on detached ADUs in rural county, helping us hit our goal for housing.
No, they're authorized everywhere else in the state.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I heard mumbling about was yes, detached, but maybe a distance constraint
That's
on
what we
that.
talked about.
Yeah, I think a distance constraint makes sense, because I'm sorry, if you own a 20-acre lot in rural county and you want to build an ADU on the opposite end of it, that is not an ADU, that's a separate house, right?
And we do have that language in the draft code already.
I was pretty sure that it got incorporated, I just wanted to make sure.
How many feet is it from the primary?
100 feet.
100 feet, okay, yeah. I
That's
know we
reasonable.
talked between 100 and 200 before.
And that's good for environmental impact. You're not building a huge amount of extra driveway. You're not huge amounts of ground being dug up for septic tanks and stuff that way. I think that's reasonable. And so it sounds like the draft reflects our opinions on that. Can we get a quick?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good on that. Want to move on to density bonuses and clusters. Again, it sounds like the current draft already reflects our opinion on this. Any dissenters on this? I'm not hearing any dissenters on, that was, I know that was a point of contention, particularly for me, because it's one of those areas where a little bit of environmentalism, a little bit of housing equity can be abrasive against each other. It's not the easiest needle to thread, but thumbs up for clustered housing reflecting our opinions. We're good? All right, moving on. Direction on parking requirements for multifamily. That is a language that we specifically asked for and they implemented. Any dissenters? Hearing none? Okay, direction on real estate disclosures. This is something that we had a brief meeting on. So if I understand correctly, Maya, this would remove the obligation from realtors to disclose that a property is in a military influence area when they're selling it?
That's correct. And the thought behind that is that it's more appropriate to do a regional approach so that we and the cities and Pierce County are all issuing the same disclosure notice. If we adopt something as part of our code, then it's not necessarily consistent throughout the county. So they had some suggestions and some examples that they could provide. And at this time, I don't think there's a huge reason why we wouldn't take their word of advice and pull it out and then just pursue a regional approach.
I'm convinced.
I'm personally, this seems fine. I don't know who's moving to this area and can miss JBLM, but do you have a comment?
So just to be clear, if we remove this this requirement now, we are still pursuing the goal of that.
Just at a regional
At a
level.
regional level.
Mhm.
Was the
Good.
primary point of that because of the artillery range and stuff like that, and the overflights for helicopters and stuff? Okay.
And it's a fairly small, area within Thurston County that has like the flight path that
Right.
is over it, but the artillery, I mean, you hear that noise even outside of this overlay. So I think of pursuing it on a regional approach is probably a better
Well, where
course
I
of action.
live, we hear it all the time and we call it the sound of freedom.
Okay, so temperature check, if folks are in favor of removing that requirement and pursuing it at a regional level. I'm not seeing any opposed, so we're good on that. Does that give you answers you needed for development regulations?
That is perfect. I just want to clarify the parking requirements. You asked for a range in the draft of 0 to 1.5, and we need a number. We can't have a range in the final code. So, let me see if I can pull up the existing language that is in there. I think the requirement right now is 1.5 per dwelling, and the consideration was, do we want to take that all the way down to 0? So.
I do.
I'm actually in favor of taking it to 0. I don't think we'll get there for consensus on it, though.
We try.
Can we, let's test 0 just to see where we're at.
I feel like it's punitive.
2, 3, 4, 5. Right, Joel, where are you at on the 0?
I'm not there yet.
Okay, so we have 5. We're not at a majority on 5. I would be interested in testing 0.5.
And so just to clarify, this is the minimum required amount of parking. It is not limiting it as the maximum. So, if you have 20 units and it's down at 0, they would not be required to put any parking, but they could still opt to put parking with the development.
Go ahead.
Okay. I understand what you're saying, Maya.
Mm.
Problem is that when you have apartment complexes and stuff, and you have a developer and you have a minimum requirement of 0 or 0.5, what do you think they're going to do?
Put 0 because it's expensive.
And then they start parking on the street and they block everything up. And I could give you photographs of this particular incident in Yelm, Washington right now, where they built dwellings, detached and attached dwelling units in the same area in a footprint of like 16 to 1. And they're parking all in front of the fire department right now.
Mhm.
Okay, because they don't have parking in the street in some cases. So it's just not good for the neighborhood. It isn't.
So,
And I think the other thing is we aren't talking about downtown Olympia, where there's
Right.
a lot of options for transportation.
Right.
We're talking about Grand Mount.
Mhm.
And we were talking about Grand Mountain, and we're also talking about, Rainier and, Roy and, Yelm.
Barry, you're gonna plan for Pierce County too.
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of different people this last week.
So,
I love it in the ideal, in a perfect world, of course, it would be.
so
But in the real world, it would be Hunger Games. Where
it is a negative incentive to,
to drive
Yeah.
are gonna be fighting each other for parking. It's a security issue for some families, not to be, I mean, I think we're just not there. I don't think we.
I think,
so. What I was gonna say, so really here, we have 5 who are okay with 0. The question really becomes, of the dissenters, which is Commissioners Halverson, Nelson, Kaiser, and Hanson, what is the lowest any of you are willing to go? Because whatever that number is what we decide.
yeah.
Well, I thought we had talked about 1.5.
That's what are already in there.
Excuse, yeah, 1.
And there's half of the commission that wants to go lower.
I'm not there.
Commissioner Hanson,
Seeing the
how low are
results.
you willing to go? He's
That's a good question. I might be at the 1.5 as well right now.
As a point of reference, right now for duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, we have 1 per dwelling unit. And then, so this captures multifamily that is 5 or more units in the development, which Grand Mountain is really, even with the other UGAs that we have in rural county, we're talking about Grand Mountain. And the transportation, it just doesn't exist there yet. So, yeah, just for your consideration.
So this would, if we went with 1.5, that would increase the requirements from what they are.
The number we're considering is only for large developments over 5.
Yeah.
Right now, in our current county code, the number is 2, and so the planning commission asked to consider 0 to 1.5.
I would, yeah, I don't know. I would strongly push for a 0.5 or a 1 on this.
So 1 would be 1 parking spot per unit in a dense multifamily thing in rural county.
Yeah.
So when you look at actual occupancy in a lot of those developments, it's lower actually than the middle housing options.
Yeah.
So there's more, you actually have lower.
You're more likely to get
occupancy rates.
efficiency apartments where you're not effectively having 2 car owners for a lot of those.
Yeah.
So you might actually be over allocating, there's a risk of over allocating parking based on occupancy in higher density units.
I also think that there's something to be said about, I mean, this is the widening streets argument too. It's just like, there's a point at which that is the pressure that we're trying to put in order to incentivize more transit, in order to disincentivize parking. Like, that does have a pressure component of it, and I think that's necessary.
And that's fine if you're in the city like Tumwater or Olympia, where they have the transit availability.
And I think that's a conversation that we also need to have, which is about increasing transit availability, but I think those exist in separate spots.
I
That's not
think
gonna,
they're connected well enough that if you put the pressure to get rid of the cars, it will
Yeah.
put the pressure to bring down.
And we're looking to develop Grand Mound into a population center, right? And a population center really does need transit, but it won't get transit without pressure both up and down on that. It doesn't happen organically. And so a little bit of crunch on parking helps us achieve the goal of making Grand Mound that population center.
Quite honestly, I'd rather see them put in more living units than parking spaces.
Absolutely, I'm there with you. Affordable housing is a serious issue. So Joel, could we persuade you to 1 on these large developments? We're talking 5+ units.
no, I thought she said 2.
That's what they are, right?
It's 2 for the smaller.
So I think about people that are living in a large apartment unit in Grand Mound. They are likely working in Centralia, Chehalis, or Tumwater, Olympia. And if you got, 2 people living in a unit going to work and back every day and Grand Mound is what they can afford. Are we really at a place where there's only 1 car per unit? That's what I don't know. I worry that we're going to create a situation that really, I know we want to disincentivize driving, but are we just making life harder on people who are already having a difficulty affording to live in the county? That's the question I'm wrestling with.
I agree with you, Joel. I mean, that is the crux of the problem, is what kind of pain are we putting on the people in that lower income bracket that's both members of the family have to work. They're going in different directions. They're in an area which they don't have a lot of transit availability right now, and are not gonna have it for several years, actually.
There's cost to that too, though, so,
Yeah, the more expensive housing is what you get.
expensive housing.
And I'm sorry, if I was offered cheaper housing with less parking and I might have to get creative with carpooling and stuff, that's appealing. That is the point of trying to incentivize density in there. So I'm actually interested, 1.5
I just
is.
don't see the jobs in Grand Mound though. People are going to be going somewhere, 15, 20 miles away to work every day.
So I'm interested to test 1.5 because I'm fairly certain we don't have a majority on 1.5 either, but let's test it.
1.5 or on 1?
Just on 1.5, that's, so Joel is okay with 1.5.
I'm okay with
Barry said he
1.5.
could support 1.5. I'm trying to see if there is at least 6 on 1.5.
Wait, I'm opposed to I'm opposed to more like increasing this, and I'm.
So
concerned
we're
with-
testing 1.5 right now.
Okay.
So are you in favor or not in favor? So we're at 4 in favor of 1.5. So what number do we land to between 0 and 1.5 that we can get consensus on? Is it 1.25? Right, and a 5 unit, that would give you 6 parking spaces.
I mean, I've seen the results of low parking space availability. It's not pretty.
I'm not disagreeing. I still think it's worth doing.
Yeah, it's almost as ugly as subsidizing driving and spending 1/3 of our cities in concrete.
Yeah.
And creating heat islands
Mhm.
and making more
And
expensive housing.
I think the market will solve the parking problem.
I agree.
For once.
This is a moment for him.
This is the first touch of the invisible hand I've allowed.
Yeah, if developers can't rent out their.
Such a metaphor. Oh, I apologize to the folks in the audience for that one. Joel, could you get to 1.25?
If we were talking about in Olympia, this would be a different thought process for me.
Yeah, me too. Where do you live?
I live in Olympia.
Yeah.
I live in a situation
live
actually
in
pretty
Tumwater.
close to somewhere, but I live in a situation that's actually dealing with the problem that you're talking about, in which we have a mix of commercial and residential, and everyone has too many cars, and we end up with this kind of pressure, and it has pushed people to alternatives to driving. I've seen it happen in my street, so I know that this is a thing. It does create a certain level of conflict, but that conflict creates problem solving. And like, we've seen that problem solving happening in my area.
So to put into context, 1.5 versus 1.25, a 20 unit complex at 1.5 is 30 parking spaces. 1.25 is 25. Joel, could you get behind 1.25? The reduction of 5 parking spaces. That will push some people to the street. The street can handle 5 people.
I don't mean to be obstinate here.
Yeah.
But this density going up and then up and up from 0 isn't making me feel.
I'm just trying to see if we can get to consensus on 1.25. We might not be able to even do that.
Yeah.
And it may be one of those situations where we need to wait until next meeting, and hopefully Commissioner Pessinger is here and we can break
or we don't have to give a recommendation on this particular topic.
we could just leave our range in there and then leave it up to the
Say that we
BOCC.
did not come to consensus.
Yeah.
Well, so we don't have all members here, so I'll make an executive decision here, and let's move it to the special meeting agenda to touch that particular topic.
We'll have less people at the special meeting than we do here now.
That's true.
Try again, and if we can't, then it's definitely not something we can get done. We're out of runway.
Could nominate champions for different numbers and do paper, scissors.
Yes.
Commissioner Halverson v. Commissioner Casino. Get you big fluffy gloves. It'd be
Rock,
great.
paper, scissors.
Alright, so with that, folks, I think we're at time for this topic. We got through a lot. The direction, so we literally covered everything except for that parking range. Maya, so how are you feeling? You're feeling good about how much we got through today?
Yes, great job. So at the next meeting, we'll recap parking. There was one other piece that wasn't in my memo, density bump in Grand Mound, which is another development regulation thing. We'll recap the utilities chapter if folks want to send language on that, and
we're
then
revisiting housing, yeah?
and housing.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a reasonable amount of stuff to get through, though.
On that UGA one, I'm also, just when we get there, the residential or commercial, I'm a
Yes.
Porque no dos person on that. So there's an option.
There was Spanish flying. I
You don't remember the commercial, Porque no los dos, soft taco, hard taco.
I grew up in rural central Pennsylvania and
Feel like
did
you
not
would have
have
gotten
cable,
the
so.
Americanized Mexican
Internet
food
enough,
commercials.
anyway.
Okay, moving on. So keeping to agenda, Thurston 2045 update, Maya.
None additional from me.
Wonderful. With that, we have already covered good of the order, so I will adjourn the meeting. 5 minutes early, everyone. Congratulations.
Good job.
Nice work.